Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Samich Vov Amud Aleph, starting with Samich Hey Amud Beis, 10 lines from the bottom. The Gemara recounts the following episode: Rabbi Chanina bar Yosef, Rabbi Chia bar Abiv, Rabbi Asi. These three sages came. Ikloi lahu pundak. They went to visit a certain inn. The Osa Nochri Mori de Pundak Beshabto, where the owner of this inn, a Nochri, came, he arrived on Shabbos. Omru, they said to each other, Mahu, Lemegar Mine, could we go ahead and rent from this Nochri the Rishus, so that we can go ahead and use the Chotzer? Soicher Kima'arev Domi. On the one hand, do we say that a Soicher, when one rents, it's like one who is ma'arev. And what is the comparison? When it comes to being ma'arev, making an erev chatzeros, you cannot do that on Shabbos. Ma'arev mi ba'od yoim af soichem ba'od yoim. Only being ma'arev and erev chatzeros can be done before Shabbos. So too then, being soicher from this nochri cannot be done on Shabbos, only before Shabbos. Or perhaps we can compare the soicher renting from this nochri to one who is mevatel his rishus, which could be done on Shabbos. Ma mevatel rishus va'afilu b'Shabbos, af soicher va'afilu b'Shabbos. Just as one can mevatel his rishus on Shabbos, so too he can go ahead and rent from the nochri on Shabbos as well. Says the Gemara, Rab Chanina bar Yosef Amar Niskar. Rab Chanina bar Yosef said, Lekula, let us be soicher from this nochri on Shabbos. In other words, let's compare it to being mevatel on Rishus. Rabbi Asi Amar Lo Niskar. Rabbi Asi was choylek, and he said, no, let's go lechumra, and not go ahead and not go ahead and soicher the Rishus from the nochri, because it's compared to somebody who wants to make an erev chatzeros. Omar Lahu Rav Chia bar Abba, the third sage, he then said, Nismech al divrei zokein v'niskar. Let us rely on the words of the zokein, Rav Chanina bar Yosef, who said we shall be niskar, we shall go ahead and be soicher the rishus for the nochri on Shabbos. Let's be mekil. Says the Gemara, Osu shailu le Rabbi Yochanan. Subsequently, they went and they asked Rabbi Yochanan what was the correct halacha, what was the correct hanhaga in this situation. Omar lahen, Rabbi Yochanan said to them, on top of Samech Vov Amud Aleph, Yofe asisem shesachartem. Rabbi Yochanan said, it's correct, it was good what you had done by renting the rishus from the Nochri on Shabbos. In other words, Rabbi Yochanan said, we can compare it to indeed somebody who is mevatil his rishus, just like one who can mevatil his rishus on Shabbos, he can go ahead and be soicher from the nochri on Shabbos as well. Says the Gemara, To ba Neher Doi. The people of Neher Doi, they themselves scrutinize, they want to understand Rabbi Yochanan's reasoning. And they said, Umiyah Rabbi Yochanan hachi, did Rabbi Yochanan really say this? That you can go ahead and soicher your rishus from the nochri on Shabbos. V'ha Omar Rabbi Yochanan soicher k'ma'arev domi. Rabbi Yochanan said that soicher is compared to one who makes an eruv an eruv. My la ma me'arev mi ba'od yom af soicher mi ba'od yom. Did he not mean to say that just like one can only ma'arev mi ba'od yom before Shabbos, so too one can be soicher only before Shabbos, but not on Shabbos itself? And therefore, how could you say that Rabbi Yochanan really said that it was good that you would go ahead and be soicher from the nochri on Shabbos? The Gemara says, Loi, that's not the kavanah of Rabbi Yochanan when he compared it to somebody who's ma'arev. Rather, he said three different kulos in regards to renting a reshus. He said, Ma me'arev va'afilu bepachas meshava pruta, af soiche bepachas meshava pruta. Just like one who can me'arev, make an erev chatzeros with something that is less than a shava pruta, so too, one can go ahead and be soicher with less than a shava pruta. We saw earlier in the Gemara The Gemara had brought a machlokes. How does Eruv Chatzeros work? Does it work mitam kinyan or mitam dira? In other words, do we say that when a person puts a pas, when they all take their pas and they put it into one person's house in that chatzer, whereby they enjoin to make Eruv Chatzeros, is that working because they're kaineh, part of that bias, ayidei, the fact that they went and put the pas in the bias? Or no, do we say that they're not being kaineh anything, but since the pas, food, is considered to be one's focal point in the home, therefore when they put the pas in the bias, it's now like they have a dira, it's like they have a home that they're shaykh to, whereby they all enjoin Eruv Chatzeros that way. So this opinion saying that we had said in the Gemara there before, that the nafkamina between whether you say Eruv Chatzeros works mitam kinyan or mitam dira, the nafkamina, one of them would be if it's pachas mishava pruta. If you have a pachas mishava pruta, let's say you have a pas less than a shava pruta, that, according to the man da'omer that says it's mitam dira, will work. Because if you say it's mitam kinyan, you can't make a kinyan with less than a shava pruta. So this opinion of Rabbi Yochanan is stating that indeed that it works mitam dira, and therefore, yes, you can make it with less than a shava pruta. So too, you can be soicher less than a shava pruta. That's the first kula that Rabbi Yochanan stated. Another comparison to being ma'arev. Uma me'arev afilu schiroi velakitoi, just as we had stated before, that you can make ma'arev when you have somebody who's an employee by a nachri. That employee can go ahead and make an eruv, and that itself is going to be sufficient. So too, so too, one who is being soicher, it's enough for the employee, the Jewish employee of the employer who is a nachri, to go ahead and also be soicher. That would be sufficient. A third kula that Rabbi Yochanan had mentioned in regard to the comparison to ma'arev. Uma ma'arev chamisha sheshruim b'chatzer achas echad ma'arev ayidei kulon. Just as we had learned, there's a kula when it comes to when you have all five that collected pas to make and enjoin in one Eruv Chatzeros, and then they wanted to also enjoin in a second nearby chatzer, the adjacent chatzer, which also has to then make an Eruv Chatzeros between the two Chatzeros. So one of the five can go ahead and take the pas on behalf of those others and put it into the other Chatzer, enjoining the both Chatzeros on their behalf. So too over here. So too when it comes to the Soicher. Soicher nami chamisha sheshuim b'chatzer achas. Echad soicha idei kulon. So too when it comes to being soicher, when you have 5 Jews that live in one chatzer that is shared with a nachri, not all 5 Jews have to then be soicher from the nachri. One can go ahead on behalf of the other ones and be soicher the reshus from the nachri, and that's sufficient. So we have 3 different comparisons that are kulos to ma'arev that Rabbi Yochanan stated. And therefore we can maintain that Rabbi Yochanan said, indeed it was good that you were soicher to the nachri on Shabbos, because indeed, just like when it comes to being mavatil, one can do that on Shabbos, so too can be soicher on Shabbos. The Gemara now says, Toyiba Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar wanted to analyze and understand as well. Rabbi Zeira said, Mai tehoye, the Rabbi Elazar. What was Rabbi Elazar trying to analyze? He didn't understand. Rav Sheishes, Gavar Rabbi, Rabbi Zeira lo yada ma tehoye. The Rabbi Elazar, a great man like you, Rabbi Zeira, did not understand why he wanted Rabbi Elazar to analyze this inyan. Because he had difficult the statement of what his Rebbe Shmuel had stated. The Omar Shmuel, for Shmuel has said the following 3 different halachas. Now, the third halacha is going to pose a problem, a potential difficulty with what Rabbi Yochanan said, as follows. Kol makoim she'oisrin ma'arin. The first thing he said was, in a situation where everybody can go ahead in a situation and oyser, they're all going to be oyser, and yet they're able to also make an eruv, then mevatlin. They can also mevatel reshus as well. The Gemara is going to explain this. The second statement that Shmuel has stated was ma'arvin ve'ein oisrin. They could make an eruv, and they will not be oyser on each other. In such a case, the din will be a mevatlin. They cannot go ahead and mevatel the reshus. The Gemara again will explain this as well. The third statement that Shmuel made, and this is going to ultimately pose a potential question, and that's why he wanted to analyze it, is as follows. Oisrin ve'ein ma'arvin. If they were oyser, they prohibit on each other, and they cannot make an eruv, they will not be able to make an eruv, ein mevatlin, they cannot go ahead and mevatel reshus either. Now the Gemara explains, going through each one of these statements. The first one, kol makom she'oisrin u'ma'arvin mevatlin. In a situation where they all, in a place where they can go ahead and they will prohibit, and they will be able to make an eruv, the din is they can go ahead and also mevatel the reshus. Kigon, what are we talking about? Shtei chatzeros zu lifnim mizu. When you have two chatzeros, one chatzer is an inner chatzer, the other chatzer is an outer chatzer. The inner chatzer can go through the outer chatzer to get to the mavui or to the reshus harabim. And over here, the inner chatzer did not make his own eruv. So therefore, even if the outer chatzer did make his eruv, the inner chatzer will go ahead and prohibit, according to everybody, not only Rabbi Akiva, but even the Rabbanan will prohibit the people from the outer chatzer from using their chatzer. So this case is talking about kol makom she'oisrin, they are prohibited, uma'arvin, and they could make an eruv, then they would also, in such a situation, be able to mevatel. So if they would then go ahead and make an eruv, the inner chatzer together the outer chatzer, and the inner chatzer would make their own eruv, and the outer chatzer would their own chatzer, and they would make an adjoining eruv. Then they would also be able to also, since they could do that, they could also then mevatel the reshus as well. That means that the people from the inner chatzer can mevatel the reshus to the people of the outer chatzer. The second statement, ma'arvin, they would be able to make an eruv, ve'ein oisrin ein mevatlin. They would, again, be able to make an eruv with each other, and they're not going to prohibit from one another. Then they can also not go ahead and mevatel the reshus. What is that talking about? Explains the Gemara. Kigon shtei chatzeros upesach echad beineim. You have two side-by-side chatzeros that are both opening up to a mavui, or reshus harabim, and in between the two chatzeros is also an opening that one can go from one chatzer to the other chatzer. So it states over here again, we're talking about where they could make an eruv together in joining the two chatzeros, and if they don't, then they are not, and if they do, they will not be oyser on each other. And therefore, however, they in this situation they will not be able to mevatel. They cannot mevatel the reshus one to the other. That wasn't something that was a thing that's possibly done. All they can do is make an eruv if they wish, but if they don't, then they will not aser on each other, because each one will make their own personal eruvs, and each will then be using their own chutzner to go into to their mayas, to their chutzner, and so on. And they could go ahead and again make an eruv to then combine the two chutzers, but they cannot mevatel the reshus one to the other to then enjoin the two. The third case, and this is now what poses the problem on Rabbi Yochanan, that Rav Shmuel said, Oisrin ve'ein ma'arvin, ein mevatlin. They're oyser, but they would not be able to make an eruv, and they're not able to mevatel. La'asuye mai. Now, he says, what is this coming to include? Lav la'asuye nachri. Are we not talking about, we're talking about a nachri? That means the situation is that they are oyser. We're talking about where the Jews are osir on each other if they don't make an eruv, and they're not able to make an eruv currently because you have a nachri. Ein mevatel, they cannot mevatel reshus either. So says the Gemara, aren't we talking about a case where there's a nachri? V'ida asa me'esmol, but if the nachri came from the day before an erev Shabbos, then loy gar me'esmol. Then why can't you go ahead and rent to him the reshus me'esmol? whereby the Eruv would be a good Eruv too. Elo, on top of Samech Vav Amud Beis says the Gemara, Lav de Osa b'Shabto. Is it not that the Nachri came on Shabbos? And that's the case that Shmuel is talking about. Viktani, it states, Oisrin, ve'ein ma'arvin, ein mevatlim. They're Osir, and they would not be able to make an Eruv because the Nachri is now present, and they would not be able to then rent the Vishus. They would not be able to mevatel the Vishus. So therefore, that's what we're talking about over here, Shema Mina, that indeed it's talking about Shabbos, and on Shabbos, since now he arrived on Shabbos, their Eruv is not going to be able to be valid because they can't go ahead and potentially rent for him a reshus either. So therefore, this is the potential problem that we had before, because Rabbi Yochanan did state earlier that this was good what they did, that they rented the reshus to the Nachri who arrived on Shabbos. This now poses a contradiction to what Rabbi Yochanan said, because Shmuel says otherwise.